Welcome to Breaking with Tradition, a new Catalyst podcast where we follow in the footsteps of our founder, Felice Schwartz, and sit down with change-making leaders and professionals accelerating diversity, equity, and inclusion in today's global workplace.
Founded in 1962, Catalyst drives change with unparalleled thought leadership, actionable solutions, and a galvanized community of multinational corporations to accelerate and advance women into leadership. Because progress for women is progress for everyone. We're your hosts. My name is Lucy Callan.
I'm Victoria Coquetz.
And I'm Erin Souza Resendiz. And we're three Catalystas that live in different regions around the globe. We're united by one goal: to create workplaces where anyone can thrive, regardless of their identity. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the first episode of Breaking with Tradition. I'm Erin Souza Resendiz, and I'm sitting here with my fellow hosts, Lucy Callan and Victoria Coquetz.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, you two.
And hi, Erin.
And I want to kick us off by saying that this podcast really draws inspiration from Catalyst founder, Felice Schwartz, who in her 1992 book called Breaking with Tradition, envisioned a workplace based on quote unquote fulfillment, both personal and professional, where everyone's able to define and pursue their goals freely, regardless of gender. I just love that. And I think it's a goal that we're still working towards, frankly, even over 30 years later, right? And that vision really resonates so much. And I think our organization as a whole, and as someone who works in communications here at Catalyst, I think about our work as Breaking with Tradition all the time, because really what we're focusing on is our shared humanity. And in some ways that can feel revolutionary.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. I'm with you. I like that feeling of revolutionary. Yeah, I like that.
I totally agree, Erin. This is the future of work we at Catalyst really seek to create at workplaces everywhere. That's really our why. And when I think about it as well, as in my role as Director of Supporter Success, I'm always thinking about the wicked challenges we're facing worldwide, and especially within corporate. From a productivity crisis and AI upskilling and adoption across industries, we're constantly facing new and emerging challenges. So this Breaking with Tradition theme really resonates with me because we need to innovate. And from a DEI perspective, upskill and leverage the entirety of the workforce to meet these challenges and guide our clients in not just meeting those challenges, but also really building from that equity lens and position themselves as industry leaders in doing so.
Yeah, same here. And Victoria, you touched on a really good point when you said because of the work we do with the global organizations that we work with. And as so my role at Catalyst is an executive director, and I look after the EMEA world. I think Breaking with Tradition resonates with me a lot because not just from a DEI field itself specifically, but also just in terms of like how people feel in the workplace. We've moved so much in the last few years from perhaps doing what you would normally is just required of you, to actually thinking about whether the workplace matters for everyone. And that actually resonates with me. It's like the changing of the roles slightly to you come in, if you've graduated as a law student, you photocopy X amount of briefs for 600 hours, whatever, and then you start doing the real work. And to actually thinking about why people stay. And DEI, I think, is at the very core of that. So we thought it would be fitting to kick off our first episode by discussing Catalyst, the why DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion matters, and also what it is that we're seeing other organizations do to continue keeping it as an agenda item. As can be expected with Catalyst, we're a research organization. Therefore, everything we'll talk about will be evidence-based, data-backed, and we'll be talking about real examples that we're seeing organizations implement out there. And so the things we're talking about are not based on just theory, they're actually based on real examples of what organizations are grappling with right now. So I love that about it.
That's so well said, Lucy. At Catalyst, our vision for the future, as we all know, is workplaces that work for women. So let's talk a little bit more about why gender equity is critical to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So I guess a couple things that I'm thinking about today is that Catalyst really focuses on women because women are half the population. It's important to note, though, that the experience of women across the world, and we're a global not-for-profit, women are not a monolith either. So not only do many belong to other marginalized and intersectional groups, But gender itself is on a spectrum, and Catalyst research is about empowering companies to create a workplace that's equitable for everyone and really understanding those deep intersections and the breadth and depth of the work. I think what else I'm thinking about, the other thing I'm thinking about is it's also a simple way to start looking at the challenge of creating an equitable workplace. So if we can start by creating that for women, we'll make huge strides in lifting up other marginalized communities as well. If we look at Catalyst history and why Felice Schwartz founded the organization in the first place, and as we know, but for the benefit of our listeners, that was in the 1960s, we've really risen to meet the challenges of the moment as we've evolved.
Yeah, I mean, you think about 1960s in New York, and I'm sure around the globe too. Women were very limited in what expectations were for them, and so just to speak specifically to why Felice started Catalyst, I mean, she was thinking about ways to help women get back into the workforce after they'd raise their kids to school age, their kids were back in school, and just saying, how can we support women on an individual level to sort of re-enter, right, or enter for the first time, and also so important to note that it's true that for some women, work has always been part of their lives as a necessity. My own family have always been part of the do what you got to do crew. And it wasn't a choice, right? But just thinking about, 1960s America, just because of where we were sitting, right? And so that work has since evolved to not only tell, women, this is how you can advance your own career, but to say this is what organizations, leaders, and companies need to do to create the environment where women can show up, stay in, and thrive, right? So I'm really motivated by that approach that we're not fixing women, we're fixing systems, we're fixing policy, we're fixing structure. And we talk a lot about what are the policies that we have to put in place to ensure that people can feel included, that we have, promotion mechanisms that are equitable. All of that is the how. That's so important. It's how we actually get the work done, right? But to me, when we talk about gender equity and diversity, equity, inclusion, it is about finding ways for people to show up in their full humanity. And it's as simple and as complicated as that. If it weren't complicated, we probably would have, this wouldn't be an issue. We would have solved it 60 years in, right? So I like to think about kind of stripping it down to its most basic, which is how do people embody their full humanity in the workplace? And that's not easy for many, many groups of people, including women.
Yeah. You make a really interesting point. It's funny, I was on a call earlier on today, and I loved the way one of our supporters described building out on the equity space, building equity spaces in the workplace. And she said, and I think this is also relevant as maybe 50% of I think 50% of the population or countries are going to the polls to vote, right? And she said it's up to the leaders to create diplomatic, safe environments in the workplaces that can appeal and work for everyone. I thought that was absolutely spot on because the US, you're going to vote. We are going to vote here in the UK. And so, but I loved the sense of the responsibility of the leaders and thinking about a workplace that is safe and it's diplomatic and it's welcoming for all. I loved that. I thought that was really good. So you're totally right. So, and then what I was saying at the beginning when I was saying that, changing a workplace from something that is you go in, you do X, Y, Z, you clock in, you check in, you do this, you do what's required and you leave, to actually 90% of the time we are in the workplace. So wouldn't it be great if for that time that we're there, for it to be a place that we all can thrive? And our research also shows that 93% of employees say that it's important for their organization to be vocal about DEI efforts. And yet 1 in 4 of the employees said that their senior leaders rarely or never engage in DEI. conversations. Now, there's different lessons to that, right? There's a bit of, I don't know what I want to say. I don't know what my stance is. I don't want to get it wrong, etc. But if you think about the fact that it's like 93% globally of employees are saying, I would like us to have the discussion. I guess the question to the leaders is, why aren't you engaging with? But also the other thing is, it's not just about talking about D&I, because I think there's a bit about like, let's just talk about it, and also and not actually have any actions. But it's not just about talking about it. 76% of the employees want their companies to take action. And I think that's where Catalyst comes in. I'm leaning forward because I'm getting too excited now. But I think that's where Catalyst gets in. It's like 76% of your employees. So 93 are saying, let's talk about it. That's 1 in 4. And then 76% are saying, take action. And ensure that your workplace is diverse, inclusive for all. And I'll still borrow what I heard this morning, and it's diplomatic and safe for all. But just with that, and Erin, that was really good. I love the fact that you were taking me on the journey when you were going the 60 years, and I was kind of like coming with you, and I'm going, oh, we're here, and what's changed? We've got Canada, we've got the US. I've got a question for you, and this question I will answer myself as well, because what are the headwinds your region is facing? What are you hearing? And Victoria, we were talking about the fact that you were out and about and you were in meetings continuously the last few days. Just would love to know, what are the headwinds that you're hearing or seeing in your different regions?
Thanks for the question, Lucy. I've really had the benefit of being out in community the last 3 days. And, I was really thinking about the fact that we're in a situation where we really have to continue to evolve to meet the new 2024 challenges of workplaces everywhere. I think when we look systemically and not just in my region, we are seeing moments of DEI hesitation, as you said, which I think that leaders absolutely have to be able to work through. It is much better to be communicating earnestly with your employee populations than avoiding this topic or speaking about it at all. I think people can absolutely hold space for authentic leaders that they trust who are trying to communicate about DEI rather than just avoiding the topic whatsoever. And then I also think we need to see the entirety of the employee population understanding their place within the DEI conversation. DEI is for everyone, and it really makes cultures better. It leverages talent. It lets people lean in. And I think that because there is that slippage in understanding, we are seeing some DEI backlash. And so I think it's really important that men specifically understand not only their place, but their leadership within the conversation as well. And that's why I'm really proud of our MARC program, Men Advocating Real Change, which is, I think, really being uptaken across organizations everywhere so that we can really understand that DEI is for everyone. Erin, what do you think?
I love that, Victoria. Yeah, I think that the DEI truly is for everyone, and I think that the phrase, that the acronym has been weaponized and turned into something that we know it isn't. Truly, at its core, diversity, equity, and inclusion are they're outcomes that we hope to see in workplaces, right? And that's I also think if we give examples of what does it actually look like in practice, it helps people understand better what is it they're actually trying to accomplish, right? So, we're certainly in the United States, I think, seeing a lot of that sort of at least public narrative about pushback. And I'd be interested to hear from both of you if you're actually seeing that in companies themselves, because my take is that maybe that's the public narrative is, DEI is, it's true there is public backlash. I won't minimize that. But is it true that companies are stepping back or not fully embracing it? I think for organizations that were committed, they're unapologetically so, right? And I'd love to hear from you too, who have, you're really working with companies every day on this. And the one other thing I'll say is, on the examples front, if we can talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as, if it's working well, what does it really look like in someone's life? It looks like sitting here on a podcast at home while my daughter is getting on the school bus, because I'm working at home. I'm able to help her do her morning routine and then hop on a podcast. It's flexibility in where and when and how we work. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. That drives gender equity in the workplace, right? It's being paid fairly and having transparency around that pay. And if there is a gender gap in that pay, your organization knowing that and knowing what your company is going to do to fix it, right? That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'll say, I think, especially from a communications perspective, the more we can give real life examples and show what this means for real people, the better.
I love that. I think, Victoria, I'm going to jump in just because I'm going to forget.
Please go right ahead.
But I wanted to answer that question about how's it showing up in your region as well, right? And I'll tell you where our organization's dialing back, because you're totally right, Erin. And you're right. The backlash is real. Whichever way it may come in, it may come through. They may call it whatever we want to call it in terms of fatigue. But what we are seeing, actually, for those, I guess the dial back, what I think, if you want to call it that, is organizations that have seen this as a project. So we're going to do DEI for a period, which means that we're just going to do policies. We're going to change X, Y, Z. It's a one-off project. We're going to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, then you kill it off. Because you didn't link it to anything that mattered. You didn't link it to strategic objectives. You didn't think of it as a market leader. This is what you want to be, or competitive edge that it will give you, or a part of when you think about your missions and your values and all of that. So the organizations that have looked at it as a one-off thing, they're probably doing something. But then those are not the organizations we're working with. The ones we're working with are the ones that are looking to embed it as a cultural shift that gives them what I just said at the beginning, a competitive edge, a differentiator in the market, an attractiveness to an employee, and understanding that says that if you don't change, and to Erin's point about if you do not think about the environment you need to create for your employees, women, men, so they can take their kids to school first, or they can do certain. If you don't have flexibility, I was making a note when you were saying that. If you don't have flexibility, then you will lose out, because your competitor across the street will have flexibility. They'll say you can come in whenever, and they'll get the most out of it. And I think that's for me, the organizations that we're working with that are smart leaders and all of that, the ones that are looking for lasting impact, that's culturally embedded, that's going to be the norm.
Wow, that was a powerful statement, Lucy. I love how you phrased that. And I think just to weigh in, Erin, I think you're right. I think that what I'm actually seeing with the incredible supporter organizations that I work with is that they're actually doubling down in these times. They're actually saying that, what's going on social media and as a political project is actually not going to affect our commitment to be world-class employers and all the things that Lucy just outlined, to be innovators, to embrace the future of work, to leverage all the talent they have in their organizations, and correctly to not categorize personal commitments and workplace commitments as well. If a mom does need to drop off her child at school in the morning and the school drop-off time is 8:50 a.m., that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they can come to work, 20 minutes later and really be the leader that the organization is working for and be productive and really deliver on the goals of the organization. So I think it's really about embracing the entirety of people's lives and knowing that when you do that, people are with you, that you've earned their trust and that they're going to be there for you and they're going to give you their all.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, so true. And again, this is what, when you're doing diversity, equity, inclusion work well, and for the right reasons, to your point, Lucy, because it's truly aligned with the mission of your organization and your values, you'll do well, right? We know that companies who do diversity, equity, inclusion well also do well, in terms of, employees who feel included are more engaged, productive. This is helpful for businesses, right? And it's the right thing to do.
So true. It is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I could talk about this with you all day, and luckily for us, sometimes we do get to in our roles talk about this. But before we sign off of our first episode of Breaking with Tradition, I wanted to ask if you could think about in your own experience in your life, in your work experience, when you've broken with tradition. Tell us about that.
Oh, that's an amazing
Oh,
question. I think that for me, it was really about changing industries and deciding that Catalyst was absolutely the right place for me and where I wanted to make my professional home. My background is really as a public policy researcher, and I had a focus on democratic engagement for the last 10 years. But in every way, that's DEI. And so I came to this recognition that in doing that work, in studying populations, I looked at polarization last year before I came to Catalyst. I looked at the needs of communities across the nation and really had important takeaways there. And what I realized is that things like economic prosperity, pay equity, trust, all of the things that we're working on at Catalyst every single day really stood out to me as an employer that was level set for 2024. And I think that, I broke tradition and I entered a new industry. And actually, I've just come up on my 1 year anniversary and I couldn't feel more fulfilled or proud or happy.
Oh, lucky us, you've been here a
Thank
year.
you.
It feels sometimes like you've been here forever, actually. Like, when was Victoria
Thank
not
you.
with us? Well, congrats. 1 year as a Catalista.
congrats, Victoria. That's awesome. Oh, yeah. So you must have joined just after
Yeah,
me, I
we came
think,
in around the same
because I
time.
think I did a year.
Yeah,
Congrats, Lucy.
yeah, similar
Yeah,
timeline, right, Lucy?
similar timelines. Yeah, congratulations to you. So I am slightly different because I like the fact that Victoria has got it like nailed in terms of like when she's done it, like when she's quite specific. I think I've always broken with tradition because I always start from the why have we always done it that way? Like
Yes.
why? And so
I love
I've
that.
always kind of go like, yeah, but why? And I think it's even from when I was at school, um, things like I went to a very sort of very traditional British, and one has to wear, and had a straw hat and all that. And I remember saying, well, and then your hair had to be a certain color, and I thought, no, I'm just so I did do this whole thing about attempting to dye my hair blonde. It came out gold, which wasn't really what I was trying to get to. But I think I've always gone for places where they'll say, and I joined telecoms of one of the biggest telecoms organizations here in the UK earlier on. And that was definitely, we do things this way, it's always done that way, and because. So I'd be like, well, why do we do it that way? So I think I've always gone into places where I feel like there could be improvement here. We could change something if we just stop thinking about that. That's the way we've always done it. And so I'm always attracted to stuff that's a bit like we've always done it this way, and I'm like, but it's not working. So why don't we shift it? So I don't really have like specific things where I can go, yeah, okay, I did this and that was breaking tradition. I think I just generally do it anyway.
You're an
Um,
innovator.
Yeah, it's just your energy. That's
so no, so
awesome.
no, but I think I tried
Yeah.
it, but I do think that I think there's something about accepting what we think is the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'll tell you the reason why. My father was a huge influence in my life, and my father said to me, I have four brothers, and I remember when we were growing up, I'd be like, oh, I can't do this, and he'd be like, why? And I said, oh, because the boys can do it, and he goes, yeah, but you're first and foremost Lucy,
Oh.
and then the next bits identify you. So I think it's always about the stuff that you should do that fit within your things that you know how to do, but also not accepting that to say that something is the right thing to do because we've always done it that way. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
normally, it's not useful for the future.
That's totally breaking with tradition. Totally. I love you both have examples that are, you know, about your almost like your
Right.
core, right? Mine's a little more tactical, I would say. Like um, an instance when I broke with tradition in the workplace in particular was working. I started out right after college working in politics and in government, and um, male dominated, continues to be. Um, and I think even just showing up as
Mm.
myself in a space that was not designed for people like me, and being genuinely me, and you know not trying to shift into kind of the more masculine norms that I was seeing in terms of, my behavior, my dress, even kind of, management style. It wasn't easy to do. And looking back, I mean, that was almost 20 years ago. And I think, oh, little me in that space, like without even realizing at the time, just like my presence in the arena as a young woman around a bunch of people who did not share those identities was breaking with tradition in a way. And also another time when I broke with tradition, and I hope that it helped others do the same thing and actually change a tradition and sort of set a new norm, was right after I had my daughter 10 years ago. I was working in a job that I absolutely loved. I was working in communications at an organization that was helping to understand the obstacles and opportunities for women in politics, and what are the challenges when we're trying to help women ascend to the highest offices. And interestingly, a lot of the challenges are very similar to what we see in business and every other space, right? So that's not surprising. But I was, had a very long commute. It was, far from home, and it was this was, of course, pre-COVID, and when working remotely and hybrid was not the norm. And I very quickly realized, in order to be the type of employee I wanted to be, have a job I loved, and be the type of parent that I wanted to be, I had to have a hybrid schedule so that I could physically be present more and, frankly, not commute 3 hours and be exhausted when I got home. So I asked if I could have a hybrid schedule. And I know this was, in 2013. And because I made the case for that, was unapologetic about why I should do it and could do it. And then that set a new precedent for the organization, and it was available to everyone.
Yeah, you deserve a round of applause. That's incredible. That's a powerful story.
I'm still proud of that, because it felt like a bit of a norm change. And it's so interesting to think about it now, like how much change we've seen in 10 years. Like, we're all sitting here working remotely, the three of us at least, and many organizations are doing that, or at least having discussions about what hybrid could look like. That's a pretty rapid pace of change in a decade.
Erin, that's a fabulous story. I'm sitting here, and you reminded me of something, because when you talk about the male-dominated, and I think we should talk about this at some point, like what do you do when you enter a market or an industry that feels like you're the only, and how you cope. And also the armor and all of that stuff, and the bravery to speak up. I just thought that some of the stuff you talked about there and were just so profound. And also how we forget those moments, right, where you've changed a policy, because that's what you did.
Yes.
You created a policy and a working environment for your colleagues. I wonder how many people also knew that was because of that. It was triggered by what you requested.
And felt inspired, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, totally. That's a great story. We should tell more. In fact, I'm going to tell everyone about that now at Catalyst.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's interesting, because I thought of it as, okay, I'm advocating for myself. So it was more of the like, okay, how can, if we're looking at sort of the traditional model of advocacy, it's like, okay, individual woman, what are you doing to help yourself? And actually, yes, that was the case, but actually what it turned into was a systems shift. And part of it too is I had a manager and mentor at the time who was very unapologetic and authentic about her own identity as a working parent too. And so that was modeled, and seeing her ability to say, okay, I have to leave at 5. I have daycare pickup, and doing it, not saying, oh, I'm so sorry, or, just doing it. So I think she also unknowingly was modeling how to break with tradition a little bit too.
Okay.
So mentorship and sponsorship, critical. That could be a whole other topic.
And actually, to bring it home and back to Felice Schwartz, I think about what you did, and I really think about her in that moment as well, right? We think about one individual woman sitting at a table, advocating for a better career and system for herself. And now we look 60 years later, and we're joined by a global community of the most incredible organizations across the globe. And so it goes to show you that individual advocacy can actually lead to global change.
Absolutely. Very tough.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's good that, Erin, one of the things you talk about is the leaders. You were giving that example of that woman. I had a really good manager at one of organizations where I think there's always this theory about it's not the same now, but if you're in the office, you won't leave because you're walking around, looking around, and you feel this anxiety about leaving early. And what my manager used to do is, when we should be leaving, she used to walk around and speak to everybody in the wherever they might be sitting and saying, "What are you doing this evening?" Which was her way of saying, "Time to go home." So, what are you doing this evening?
I
What
love
what
that.
plans have you got? And she literally, and it took me ages to figure out. It was brilliant.
Brilliant.
It was literally, she would just, it would get to, I think it was like 5:30 or whatever. She would come around and say, "So, what are you doing this evening?" And you think, yeah, this evening. Um, it was like a mind shift,
Hmm.
but and there were just subtle things that she used to do. And I pray that one day I'm at least half the manager, that half the leader she is, because she would do these things that were just sort of so considerate. And what it meant is, you have the permission to go now. There's no need to carry on. It's fine. Just go. Go and start your life.
Mm.
You've been at work. Go and spend some time with your loved ones, or just go do something else for yourself. I always remember that, and I always think that's such a good way of saying it's the end of the day.
Hmm.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. I'm gonna borrow that because it's hard. I think it's something that's even harder to do as a manager when you're managing folks in a remote
Yeah.
environment, because you might see their little,
Yeah.
their green on
Yeah.
Teams or whatever, but you don't, we're not seeing them throughout the day in the same way. Okay, this has been truly, I mean, what a joy! It's been so much fun to start breaking with tradition with both of you, Lucy and Victoria. And with this podcast, I hope that we'll continue to challenge the now and embrace
Yeah.
new as we strive for a better workplace for women and for everyone.
If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen, watch on YouTube, or find us on catalyst.org/podcast.